All right. All right. Here we go. Get the screen. Hopefully it's loading. There it is. All right. So now we're getting into the major beliefs that we've referred to some degree, like the cycle of reincarnation, the Maya, the Atman, and so forth. So we'll kind of look at the overarching structure, worldview of Hinduism, the main elements of its belief. First is transmigration of the soul. To remember that in most of Hinduism, the only reality is Brahma, Brahman, and Atman, the soul. And but you have this cycle of reincarnation called samsara, which literally means wandering, or a chain of infinite existence that hold the soul to this world. So it's you're wandering through the world over and over again, never knowing where you're going to come out in the cycle of reincarnation. And it's this infinite chain of existence that the soul is going through. It's sometimes represented by this ship. What do you call those things? Steering wheel, but it's a steering wheel for ships. It's a common symbol for this idea of samsara. It just keeps going in a circle. I'll draw a complete blank on what those things are called. But in either case, an individual is transmigrated from one existence to another according to one's behavior. And so that's your karma. You've heard people say, well, he's got bad karma, or well, that's he's lacking good merit, or if he has good karma, he's accumulating good merit. So your good deeds, bad deeds, make up your karma. And to transmigrate to a positive, in other words, go up the scale in reincarnation, you have to have more good karma than bad karma in your current life. And so let me go here. This is not mentioned in the Vedas. And so that's why people think that the idea of this transmigration of soul came later, because it's not in the older writings. And so they're thinking that when the Aryans came in, this was part of indigenous people's thinking and got assimilated into the whole idea of Hinduism. But it becomes the source for the caste system, as we noted earlier, Varna based on color, and so it's very important in that regard. Negatively, this whole cycle of reincarnation is viewed negatively because you're locked into this world forever with suffering, and you never can get out of it, or at least very few people ever get out of it. And that's why you have Buddha later trying the Hindu ways, and as a Hindu decides none of those are workable, comes up with his own system, which in itself isn't very workable either, but we'll get to that later. But they don't view the world positively. What I notice about the New Age movement and the ones who accept reincarnation and things in their philosophy of the world or their religious thinking, they tend to say, well, reincarnation is a positive thing because they live in a positive world now, and they're just assuming they'll come back in a positive world. And if they have good deeds, more good deeds than bad, that probably works out for them in their thinking. But in Hindu thinking and Buddhism, it's being locked into a world of suffering. All right, well, karma, cause and effect, cause and effect. A person's life consists of actions, both good and bad. There's no such thing as sin, really. There's not this idea, here's the ultimate standard from God, and to go contrary to that is sin. or judgment. Since you don't really have sin, you don't have judgment in the same sense as we think about it in Christianity. This symbol here is a representative of knots, endless knots, interlinking, cause and effect. This is a representation of the endless cycle of karma there. The amount of merit or demerit to be worked off will determine one's next status in life. So if you had too many demerits, your demerits were more than your merits, you'll go down in the cycle, in the castes, in reincarnation, until you work it off in the lower one, and you can move back up. That's the essence of it there. And then this is not the same as fate. You have fate, which is uncontrollable, random powers that determine human actions. When people talk about fate, well, that was my fate. It's just something that's totally uncontrollable and random that happens to you, and you don't have any way of identifying what the source of that is. But not so with karma. Karma is something you can control. You can control what you do good and bad, and so forth. You could be reincarnated as Brahmin, the upper caste, or an outcast, a woman, a dog, a plant, or a worm eaten by a fish. All of these things can be part of the cycle of reincarnation, depending on your karma. And it explains the differences in human life as far as they're concerned. So they say, well, you're in this situation, so obviously you had bad karma, and that's how you ended up here. Or if you're up here, you had good karma. So your good or bad health or poverty and riches are due basically to your karma. So that maybe gives you an idea of karma, which is what moves you up or down the scale of reincarnation. Mantra, another term you should be aware of. It's not a slogan so much as a proverb, not a proverb, but it's more of a short mystical utterance that has great sacred power. An example of that, like Om that we talked about earlier, there is something mystical about it. It has a mystical power. And so you say these mantras over and over. We have slogans today, that we hear all the time, or in Christianity, you have proverbs to live by. Mantras are not quite the same. Guru, it's not just someone that someone follows, but a private teacher of transcendent religious truths and beliefs that lead students to a full knowledge. And so we have to realize that there's a spiritual depth involved with a person that's called a guru. And he's supposed to take you to some greater knowledge of where you're going and how you get there in Hinduism. Avatar that we've talked about, not a computer user type thing, but that's probably where the word came from for picking your avatar. But the incarnation of a god, Krishna, who is an incarnation of Vishnu, and things like that. And so so this brings us over to the 4 goals of life. Number 1 goal in their belief system is Dharma. Every caste has their duty, their law, their moral teachings. And so whatever caste you're in, you're responsible for fulfilling those. And the better you fulfill them, the better karma you have. So at that, whatever caste you're in, that social morality of that caste, your ritual duties in that caste, you must be practiced, and practice. And if you reach the goals within that caste of your dharma, then you're accumulating good karma, which will help you to move up in the caste system. Second is artha, material prosperity is the next, and then kama, uh, and this is your aesthetic pleasures of life, spiritual, intellectual, physical, artistic, that you practice in that. So you're supposed to be working towards your material prosperity in whichever caste you are, but you're also fulfilling spiritual and intellectual things with kama. And then fourth, moksha, liberation from samsara. And so all of these are important in whatever caste you're in, but the lower the caste, the harder that would be to gain. And you can work up if you have more karma, good karma than bad, you can work up the system of castes. Here is a kind of diagram. So keep in mind, dharma means righteousness, law, or duty. That deals with your moral issues here. Artha, that we talked about, wealth and prosperity, it deals with economic values. And then kama deals with pleasure and deals with psychological values and like. And so you work through, first do your duties, you work up the scale, and you can increase in your prosperity, economic status, and social status even. And the kama, get to your psychological and various spiritual things, pleasure, and spiritual aspects of life. And if you do it well enough, you can get moksha, liberation from this cycle of samsara. So this is a useful representation, but it basically goes back to these four goals in life. And but these goals aren't done usually in one reincarnation. Like if you're in the untouchables, you're not going to reach these goals. You'll have to do your best in whatever low caste you're in, and you reincarnate to an upper caste. And finally, if you get high enough up, you can get to the moksha, liberation. And so that's the idea here. All right, so your highest goal, of course, in Hinduism is to find release from samsara, the cycle of reincarnation. That release is called moksha. And so you're released from the action of death and rebirth to find nirvana. Basically, for Hinduism, it's being absorbed into Brahman, your Atman, your soul. It's released from this cycle, and you're absorbed. And you're now a part of an impersonal power. And there's nothing like heavenly realm involved, where you continue to exist as a person, but with God in his presence and stuff. Even this will move over into Buddhism, where Buddhism, the Atman doesn't even go through the cycle of reincarnation, only karma. And it's even less. Nirvana is just ceasing to exist totally. But the ability to do this is found by very few. That's what frustrated Buddha, that people just couldn't do it through some of these systems. And so he invented his own, which was not easy to do either. But here's one way it's described in the Upanishad. As rivers flow and disappear at last in ocean waters, name and form renouncing, so too the sage, released from name and form, is merged into divine and ultimate existence. And so that's a description of the Atman being absorbed into the Brahman. Temples, now we get into some of the practical worship. This is a good example of a temple. There's one similar to this in Nairobi that I've driven by many, many times. It's usually dedicated to one god. Although I was in a temple in Chicago where there was one temple devoted to one god, but they had a temple that had various gods in the different alcoves of it. It just depends. It has the images of it can have images of other gods in separate rooms in inset walls like the one I visited in Chicago. Gods live there, live in their statues, but they maintain the statues. They wash them, care for them. They put food in front of them, which of course they don't eat, but it represents their devotion to the god. So their daily worship will consist, if you walk in the temple, you need to, like a mosque, you need to remove your shoes, and they usually have nice cubby holes where you can put your shoes. And people in their worship will show reverence and worship of the god by placing money in front of the god, which of course goes to maintaining the priests that take care of things there. They can chant. I saw some people reading some scriptures of their own. They had the color mark on their forehead as they do their worship. The temple service is called puja. It's devotional actions for worshiping the god, like we just discussed. It could be putting money before him. So, but they can also, when I was in one of the temples, they had a procession where they were carrying one of the gods on sticks, and only the priests can do this. And the priests are so pure that you don't shake hands with them, you just nod at them. I told you I had a friend with me when I went to visit the one temple in Chicago, and he was third generation Christian from India, but he tried to shake the hand of the priest, and the priest just kind of walked backwards away from him, letting him know that he wasn't pure enough to touch a priest. He was not a Brahmin level. And so we saw this procession, and they had playing some music, ringing bells, but there wasn't any chanting involved with it. But people could watch them bring in the god and place it in its proper position in the temple. Here's a picture. You can have worship at home, like in this example up here, or and down here. These are where they have one of the gods' images there, and they have home worship. It depends on the caste. Usually, the higher the caste, the more this occurs. And in high caste, the men pray 3 times a day. Sunrise is when it's mostly practiced, but generally 3 times a day is not unusual. You have your household gods, and you perform puja or worship there. You get up, you get washed, like a purification type of ceremony, get dressed, you decorate yourself. That would include the markings for your god. And they have very nice cultural dress they use. And the image is given food at every meal. So puja is homage or showing respect for your deities. It's usually performed by the father of the household. If you're wealthy enough, you can have your own priest, a Brahmin, who comes in and leads it for your household. Otherwise, people go to the temple and the Brahmin priest will be there to do it, and you do it with the other people. For the code of Manu divides the high caste people into 4 stages of life. Now, this is really not practiced in the lower caste. It only really occurs in the high caste. When you're born, you're in the student stage. You have the ritual regarding birth. There's a ritual to protect the unborn from evil spirits. The rituals to help the new child to be a boy. So I'm sorry, girls kind of get second-class citizenship in Hinduism. Rituals for God to protect the child, and this may refer to the goddess Parichi, who's known for protecting children. Then you have within this, you got the ritual of the male's twice born caste. And they receive a cord that goes over the shoulder. They renew this every year. And this is when they can start studies of the Vedas. So notice that the high caste traditionally have been the ones to study the Veda. And if you have a son who wants to do that, this is when this would occur. Um, the second stage is marriage and having children. This is usually, it traditionally been arranged within the caste. You don't normally marry outside your caste. It's not considered right to marry outside your caste, although you probably see more of that today than you do. I don't know how well the caste system is breaking down. It's still very strong, but you are seeing some changes in it. But you can have a ceremony where you walk around the sacred fire. There's this red dot you'll see put on the wife's forehead to indicate she's married. And so a lot of times you see a Hindu woman dressed up in Hindu dress, but you see a red dot. It's most likely meaning she's married, like we see a wedding ring on somebody's finger. You have the next stage, third stage is the forest dweller retirement stage, we call it today. But this is getting into the moksha thing, where now you have leisure time. Your family's grown up, you're retiring from your work, you've become economically successful. So now you can spend your time on spiritual matters, and you don't have to worry about earning a living. So you devote your time to prayer, meditation primarily, and then and this really only occurs for the male. You don't see this much with females, and this is where he begins to pursue the idea of moksha. And so he's getting rid of all these attachments to the Maya world, the world of illusion. And so that brings him to the last stage, which is the sannyasin or renouncer stage. If you can meditate enough and work your way out of the being attached to the Maya world, you can obtain the ideal of moksha, release from the cycle of samsara. So when you die, you will not go through the cycles of reincarnation. You'll be absorbed into Brahman, your Atman will be absorbed. But what happens at this stage is the male person so disconnects from his family, his wife, and any interaction with the world. And it's kind of weird by American thinking and Western standards, but that is part of it. And it's looked as a holy pursuit, not as something, okay, you're neglecting your family or you're neglecting your wife. They wouldn't view it that way. They view it, oh, he's on a holy pursuit, allow it to happen, even if it's not helpful to the wife. So when a person dies, you go through funeral rites. Bathing the body with water, milk, and honey and coconut is considered the thing to do. And you're burned on a funeral pyre. And it used to be that when the husband died, the wife was expected to throw herself on the funeral pyre and burn up with her dead husband. That was outlawed by the British when they colonized that area, but it was continued they continued to practice it to some degree. I think primarily it's no longer practiced, but it still can happen if a wife so does it. But it's not an expected thing as much as it used to be. Even in Uganda, where we lived, there were both Islam and Hinduism, and the Hindu had a funeral pyre place where they would burn their dead. And so you can see these anywhere where there's enough of a Hindu population. Here in Montgomery, there's actually a Hindu temple. You wouldn't recognize it very much. They took an older house and have converted it, so it's the beginning of a Hindu temple there. But you can recognize it by how they decorate it and so forth. So each goddess has a day of descent, or what we call a birthday, which they often celebrate in temples, but they can also have processions, like Holi is a celebration of Krishna. And so there's a lot of, you can imagine with all these gods and goddesses, there's almost always something going on. But the main gods and goddesses who most people worship, these are the ones you'll see of big festivals associated with the gods or goddesses. New Year's is a big one for festivals. They like to celebrate the new year. Homes are decorated with mango leaves. Women draw diagrams on temple floors and stuff like that. And if you can see this woman's hands here, she's got diagrams on it. And that's part of the celebration and festive things going on. And then you got the Festival of the Lights, which is autumn, to honor the goddess Lakshmi, usually. And the lights are seen to guide the goddess to bring prosperity. So it's a festival of prosperity to the goddess Lakshmi going on. And so like this lady with the decorated hands, and she's offering things to Lakshmi in this procession going on. So this gives us back to the worldviews that we looked at when we were looking at worldviews and comparing them to Christianity, remembering that this material world was not really real. Karma, the Atman goes through, oops, this is supposed to be the Atman here. I don't know where the name Atman went to, but Atman, oh, there it is, goes through the cycle of reincarnation. Karma decides whether you're reincarnated up to scale. You've got the universal reality of Brahma here, but you have many gods involved with that. So just to sum up, understanding the worldview of Hinduism. So Christianity and Hinduism, to finish this off, this will be basically the last slide. If you look at things where they have bridges between them, both of them have a sense of something transcendent, but you can tell it's quite different. One is a personal transcendent, the other is impersonal, but at least they believe in something outside themselves. Illusionary satisfaction, they view whatever satisfaction, pleasure you have in this life really isn't the fulfillment of life, and we wouldn't totally disagree with that. Unlike them, we might say, well, some of it is given by God for pleasure, but at the same time, it's ultimately full satisfaction has to come with your relationship with God. Bhakti, the idea of devotion, is very much a part of Christianity, so that's a good one. Self-knowledge, they talk about we need good self-knowledge, know ourselves, and practice karma, doing good deeds as opposed to bad deeds, and we wouldn't disagree with that. Self-denial is a part of Hindu thinking, as would be Christian, and sacrifice, same thing. So you have bridges available to discuss when you're talking to somebody from a Hindu background. Now, I do give you in on the website Canvas that you can see the terms for Hinduism that you want to be familiar with, especially for your exam as well. So keep that in mind. But that brings us to the end of this final presentation on Hinduism. And let me turn that off.